focus on learning chess, and contrary to popular belief, it's not such a difficult game to learn. I actually believe you can learn chess in less than 10 minutes, and that's what this video tends to prove. Hence the name, Chess Shortcuts. Okay, so first of all, we're going to talk about the chessboard, which has 64 squares, alternating colors. Some are brown, white, some are red and black. You get them in all sorts of colors. And next, I guess we should talk about the pieces. The chessboard has 32 pieces. You get 16 white, 16 black, 8 pawns each. And we're going to talk about the pawns first in this video, because each piece in chess moves differently. Okay, so the pawns move up the board. They can move 1 square up the board or 2 squares up the board. It just depends on what you want to do. But a pawn only moves straight up the board. It can't go in any other direction unless it meets an opponent's piece in the very next line, which we call a file in chess. That's the only time a pawn is allowed to cross into another line, into another file, when you're capturing the opponent's piece. But as long as there's nothing it can take in the adjacent file, then it can only move straight up the board unless it's blocked by an obstacle. Once a pawn is blocked by an obstacle like that, then it's kind of stuck there, isn't it? Okay, so pawns only move straight up the board up until a point it meets an obstacle. Then it kind of has to sit there and wait until one of his enemy pieces comes his way, and only then can he cross into, and only then can he cross into the next file, like that, by capturing. So pawn only captures sideways and can only go sideways when it's capturing an enemy piece. Okay, the next piece we want to talk about is the bishop. The bishop only moves sideways. And in chess you have 2 bishops. You got a light squared bishop that moves on the light squares, and you've got a dark squared bishop that moves on the dark squares. So a bishop only moves sideways, but unlike a pawn, it can go as many squares as it wants. So as many squares as you want to move, it can go all the way up to here. This dark squared bishop can go up to here. But now, like the pawn, the moment you meet an obstacle, you can't jump over that piece. So in this instant, this bishop can only go as far as capturing this dark squared bishop, like that. And in this instance, the pawn has an option of either moving straight up the board, like that, or capturing sideways. You also have a light squared bishop, this one, for black, which can't move in this particular case because of the obstacles in front of it. You'd actually have to move one of the pawns first. White's bishop can move, and after that, the bishop can only go as far as this pawn. Can capture that pawn like that. Can't jump over the pawn, but it's a good move in this instance because you're taking an enemy piece. So just to recap, the pawns move up the board like that until they meet opposition. At this point, once there's an obstacle, they can't move anymore, and they actually have to wait. Until an enemy piece comes in the adjacent file, and then you can capture. You have 2 bishops, a light squared bishop that only moves on the light squares, okay, and a dark squared bishop that only moves on the dark squares. So if your bishop's on the light squares, it's going to move on the light squares for the rest of the game. And if your bishop's on the dark squares, the bishop on the dark squares moves on the dark squares for the rest of the game. The next piece we want to talk about is the knight, which is a lot of people's favorite piece, particularly the younger players, because of the curious way that it moves. I like to say that the knight moves 1 square in a straight line, then 1 square sideways. So that's 1 square up, like a pawn, and then one square sideways, like a pawn when it's capturing. Or one square up, like a pawn, and then one square sideways, like a bishop, like that, creating the letter L. Okay, so it's one square upwards and one square sideways, creating that letter L, if you see that. I'm just going to do that one last time. It's one square in a straight line and then one square sideways, like that. One square in a straight line and one square sideways. Once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy. And that brings us to the big guns, the major pieces, the king, the rooks, and the queen. Now, the rooks are probably the most straightforward in piece because he just moves in a straight line. He just moves in a straight line from one point to another. As long as there's no obstacle in his path, he just keeps moving in a straight line. And he can go as many squares as he wants. Okay? At this point, this rook can go this way, but it can only go as far as this obstacle. You can capture there. Okay? But remember, you can be captured by this bishop because we said bishop moves sideways in a particular color. So that wouldn't be a particularly good move. But that was just an example so you understand how the rook moves. The rooks keep moving straightward in a straight line. You know, it can go back, forth, left and right as long as it's a straight line. Now the queen has the combined power of both the rook and the bishop. The queen moves in a straight line like that, and it can move sideways like a bishop. In this instance, okay, let's say queen there, it can move sideways like that. It can move sideways all the way up to here. It can move in a straight line all the way up to there. Equally, white can move sideways all the way up to there. So the queen moves any direction as long as there's no obstacle in its path. So the king, paradoxically, which is the most important piece in chess, is actually one of the slowest pieces in chess. It's only faster than the pawn. The king only moves one square at a time. But the advantage he has over the pawn is that he moves in any direction. The king can go in any direction as long as there's no obstacle in his path, but only one square at a time. You know. So just to recap, pawns straight up the board up until they meet an obstacle and they capture sideways. Bishop only moves sideways in a particular color. So pawns move straight up the board up until the point they meet an obstacle. Bishops only move sideways in a particular color, and they can't jump over obstacles. If you meet an obstacle, then you have to stop in that square. That's your destination square. Knights move one square up or across the board, then one square sideways, like that. One square up or across the board, then one square sideways. A king only moves one square at a time, but in any direction. And the queen can move as many squares as she wants in any direction. She could move sideways like a bishop, or she can move in a straight line like a rook. A rook only moves in a straight line and can never move sideways. So I hope that made sense, and I hope that was fun. You can leave, if you like the video, you can subscribe to my channel and leave your comments below. And that was less than 10 minutes.